The Stone Zone with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and yes, you're back in the Stone Zone. I believe that Communist China poses the greatest single threat to the United States. Joining us today to discuss this is old China hand Gordon Chang. But first, to help me in today's duties, let me bring in my co-host, Slingshot.News editor-in-chief, Troy Smith.
Roger, it's always an honor to be with you again, and I love the purple today.
Well, it's one of those days. Let's get right to it. I'm very excited about this guest. Gordon Chang joined me on my 77 WABC radio show last Sunday, and we got amazing reaction to that terrific interview, so I was anxious to get him here today. Gordon Chang is, as I say, an old China hand. Not that old personally, but he lived and worked in Shanghai and Hong Kong for almost 2 decades. He's a columnist at Newsweek. He also a contributor to The Hill, often writes for Newsmax. His writings have appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the National Review, the American Conservative. He's the author of China is Going to War, The Great U.S.-China Tech War, Losing South Korea, Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, and The Coming Collapse of China, which I believe is his latest book. His most recent book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, which is actually now available on Amazon. Joining us now, China expert, Gordon Chang.
Hey, Roger. Hi, Troy.
Good morning. Great to be with you. So, Gordon, it's always it's difficult to know where to start. China is very, very secretive, as deeply as they have infiltrated many of the institutions in the United States. Do you think China wants a hot war or a cold war with the United States?
Well, China wants to rule the world, not just control it, not just hegemony. They want to rule it. And they'll do almost anything to get it. And we have seen, for instance, China now is waging proxy wars on 3 continents. You've got Russia and Ukraine. You got China and Russia fueling insurgencies in North Africa that look like wars. You have China's full backing of Iran in the Middle East. Now you have China going hard after India, Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. This is a world that's aflame because of the Chinese. And Roger, you're absolutely right. China is the single greatest threat to the United States because China is behind almost all the other threats to the United States.
What happens here post Xi? In other words, what do you think Xi's succession plan is, if he has one?
Yeah, he has no succession plan. The Communist Party had developed norms, guidelines, rules, and understandings about succession. And people had said, even critics of the regime had said, look, China has solved the one problem of hardline states, which is transferring power from one to another. I never really thought that for a number of reasons, but clearly right now we have a strong man in China. He's tore up the entire playbook of the Communist Party about transferring power, and there's just complete uncertainty. He has made sure that there is no obvious successor, which means that when he dies, there's probably going to be an all-out scramble for power, and probably you will see chaos in China, and maybe the Chinese military taking over. But well before that, Xi Jinping probably will start a war someplace because he's got a bloodlust and he's got a lot of domestic incentives to start a war. And we can say we're not deterring him right now. So this looks extremely serious.
Obviously, there's been a lot written and reported about vice presidential candidate Tim Walz's relationships with China. We're told that he taught at a university in China. Of course, all institutions in China are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and also that he visited on at least 30 occasions, often taking students from the United States to China. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I think the most suspicious activity is taking American students and exposing them to Communist Party propaganda in China, because that effort could not have occurred without the approval of the Communist Party's United Front Work Department, which is the part of the party that subverts foreign governments. Now, Tim Walz can't say, well, I was young then and I was just a knucklehead. This occurred in the late 1990s and in the first decade of this century. And he can't say that because we know that as governor of Minnesota, he has had continuous contact with Communist Party front organizations in his state. He even appointed a Communist Party agent to a state government board in Minnesota. We know this from Daily Caller reporting. So this is his contacts with the most dangerous part of our enemy have been continuous and throughout this century. So yeah, I think that his presence on the ticket disqualifies the Democratic Party. I don't think anyone should vote for the Democratic Party ticket because of Tim Walz's position on it. By the way, I'm not a Republican. I say this because I believe that as an American, we cannot have a communist agent one heartbeat away from the Oval Office.
Troy, next question to you.
Well, thank you, Roger. Mr. Chang, my question to you is about General Mark Milley. We pulled some headlines this morning talking about the time from October of 2020 to January of 2021, where General Mark Milley, who was the Joint Chief of Staff at the time, was communicating with General Lee of China and top military generals over there, telling them that we wouldn't attack them, telling them that if the United States ever did attack them, that he would reach out because they have such a storied, long relationship. Can you speak to, a lot of people see this, Mr. Chang, and they say, well, Mark Milley must be compromised because that's the only reason that you would hand literally the keys to the castle over to China and tell them, if we attack you, we're going to warn you before that happens. I mean, that seems treasonous to me. Do you think Mark Milley is compromised by China? And can you speak to the operations of the Chinese government in the United States to compromise people like Mark Milley so that they can have their way politically?
Yeah, well, China's efforts to buy the American political system are extensive. And we know this, for instance, because of what's happened in New York State with the recent indictments, with all the investigations. Clearly, you have cases like Eric Swalwell. The point about Swalwell, because it gives context to this before we talk about Milley. The Ministry of State Security first contacted Eric Swalwell, not when he was on the House Intelligence Committee, where of course he'd be great value to Beijing, but it was when he was on the City Council of Dublin City, California. Now, that means there can't be just one American politician that China was grooming. There have to be dozens, if not hundreds of Swalwells. That's not to say Swalwell did anything wrong, but it is to show you how pervasive and how comprehensive China's efforts were. With regard to Mark Milley, regardless of China's contacts with him or lack of contacts, we know that that conversation that he said that I will warn you if we are going to attack China, that has got to be treason. And this is, you have Milley saying, I think it was to Bob Woodward, that, look, I'm afraid I'm going to be court-martialed. Well, I think that court-martial would be the least of his concerns. I think that a trial for treason would be in order. There's one other thing about Mark Milley that is a warning sign, and that is just before, this is about 2 weeks before he left his post as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he actually told the American people that China's spy balloon that floated over our country in January and February of last year did not transmit information back to China. That was in a CBS News interview, if I remember correctly. Well, NBC, in a report just a few weeks or a month afterwards, said, look, yes, this spy balloon had the capability to transmit back to China, and in fact did so. So what Milley was doing was saying was, first of all, just to me, almost, didn't have any credibility. But again, I don't have a security clearance. I don't work in the military. But clearly, others who do wanted to contradict Milley, because that statement is an indication that he was narrating sort of like a Communist Party narrative. And I don't know why he did it, Troy, but the point is, yeah, we should start looking at this.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Gordon Chang, an expert on the China-America relationships. His new book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, now available on Amazon. Let me urge you to pick up a copy of that. I have ordered it yesterday. Can't really wait to read it. So, Gordon, thanks again for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Maybe a difficult question. What do you think actually happened to the former Chinese ambassador, Qin Gang?
Qin Gang. Yes, this is a fascinating story. Qin Gang was a favorite of Xi Jinping, and he helicoptered up the ranks. That's the term that is used for officials who move rapidly up in promotion. Qin Gang apparently had some sort of connection. Maybe he had a child out of wedlock. There's a U.S. connection to it. Some people speculate that U.S. intelligence got to Qin Gang. We really don't know. But the point is, it showed turmoil in Communist Party ranks. And if this were just Qin Gang, maybe it's not significant. But there's also been other people appointed by Xi Jinping, clearly Xi Jinping's people, who have come and been chopped off very quickly. So, for instance, the defense minister, General Li Shangfu, was a Xi Jinping appointee. He lost his post within months. And so that defense minister's story sort of is parallel with what happened to Foreign Minister Qin Gang.
Very interesting. There have been reports recently that the Bank of China has been working with the Mexican drug cartels, mostly washing their money in exchange for moving fentanyl into the United States. What do you think America should do about this, or can we do anything about it?
We can do a lot about it. Under Section 311 of the USA Patriot Act, we can declare Bank of China to be of primary money laundering concern. That means no correspondent bank in New York can have relations with and clear dollars for Bank of China, which means Bank of China cannot deal in dollars out in anywhere in the world except for paper currency, which means basically this puts it out of business, at least its international business. The reason why this is important, Roger, is because the big Chinese banks have been laundering money, not just for the fentanyl cartels and fentanyl producers, but also for others around the world. China has taken over the money laundering business from the Colombians and the Mexicans. And they've been able to do it because the Chinese state has supported money launderers. Remember, China controls these large Chinese banks. And so they can't do anything without the approval of the Communist Party. So if they're laundering money for criminals, it means the Communist Party is in the money laundering business, which means we need to go after all their banks, because all their big banks have certainly been involved in money laundering for one party or another.
Troy, next question to you.
Thank you, Roger. My question, Mr. Chang, is about the spreading of China. You know, we're seeing this kind of parallel economy, a world economy being built by China, and they are, going around the country with, or around the world with BRICS and really recruiting these nations. I want to ask you, how do you think the U.S. can begin to combat that on the world stage, and how can we get in a position where we're not? It seems we're always losing ground, and China's always gaining ground. How can we make it more even, where we're not constantly losing and they're not constantly gaining?
Yeah, that's a great question. You talked about the BRICS, which is a grouping led by China, Russia, India, South Africa, and now it's a group of 10, as others have added to it. I worry a lot about China. I don't worry too much about the BRICS because India is in the BRICS, and India has a very antagonistic relationship with China. And basically, India is making the BRICS ineffectual. There's a lot of talk about the BRICS having their own currency. That won't work. I mean, when you look at the Eurozone, you're dealing with countries which are alike. They're having problems with the common currency. You can imagine with the BRICS, which are very, very different, one country from the next, they will not be able to maintain a currency. There's only one country that can tank the US dollar as the world's reserve unit, and that's us. And we're doing a pretty good job of it by this excessive spending by Congress. But in terms of what China's trying to do with the renminbi, its currency, those are things I'm not terribly concerned about at this point. Nonetheless, your broader point, though, is yes, we are losing ground. And the simple reason is we're losing ground because we don't have leadership. The Biden years resemble the Carter years, where the US was thought to be finished, and where American leaders actually, Nixon and Kissinger, thought we were done as well. What we had after Carter was a Reagan. And Reagan decided, look, we win, they lose. And he brought down the Soviet Union. Well, we need a new president who is able to exert American power, use it for the benefit, not only of the United States, but the world. Because when the US prospers, the world prospers. That's what we need. We have that, Troy, we'll be okay. We don't have that. Your broader point is of grave concern.
You've been very vocal and very articulate about the current state of China's economic health. There's a lot of indications that they're in economic trouble, that they're experiencing a downturn. First of all, let's talk about that, but also what are the global implications of that?
Yeah, the Chinese economy, it looks like it's imploding right now. They don't have the 4.7% growth that they claimed for the second quarter this year. It's basically an economy around zero, maybe a point or two in negative, maybe a half point above zero, but it is an economy that is not growing fast enough to produce the output that is necessary to retire China's very large debt load. And so right now, China is basically having its 2008. In 2008, China decided not to have a downturn, so they embarked on basically the biggest stimulus program in history. They got past 2008. They looked fearsome, but now they've got the problem of resolving all the debt that they've accumulated, and they don't have any answers to that. So the issue here for the world is because people don't understand the problems in China, when it fails, and it will, people are going to panic, and that panic will spread around the world. We shouldn't panic. We should understand China's problems, and we should understand China is not as important to the global economy as everybody says. Everyone says, oh, China is the engine of global growth. Well, that's not true. To be an engine of global growth, you've got to buy the goods and services of other countries to create growth elsewhere. And China, with its criminal and predatory trade practices, takes growth from other countries. The engine of global growth remains the United States of America.
China has obviously made deep inroads in the United States in many of our institutions, and they use money, of course, to do it. Money and thuggery. We know that they have police stations throughout the country, which they use to monitor Chinese nationals living in the United States. We know they have given vast sums to various academic institutions. We know they have purchased some of our most famous companies, our most famous brands. How deeply are they infiltrated into our country?
Yeah, China uses every point of contact to take us down, and they have overwhelmed us right now. They have bought our government. They have overwhelmed us, our businesses, our media outlets, our think tanks, universities. It's just from top to bottom. And what we have to do is sever those contacts in order for us to be able to manage this. We at some point will be able to manage it, but not now. So we have to do this to sever the relations in order that we save ourselves, because China has made it very clear they intend to destroy the United States. They declared a people's war on us in May 2019. We're Americans, so we think we're entitled to ignore what our enemies say about us. But in Communist Party thought, people's war means total war, and they're serious. And as we talked about just before on fentanyl, they're taking American lives in great numbers, and we're not defending ourselves. So although we're a far stronger society than China, we can lose our country to China unless we start defending ourselves with the vigor that is necessary.
Troy, next question to you.
Thank you, Roger. Mr. Chang, my next question is about the relationship between China and Iran. We've seen under the Biden administration that Iran has become the #1 oil exporter to China. And that gives me cause for concern, because I think that makes them a powerhouse that, if they're powering the Chinese economy, even if it, goes down, people still need energy. It's going to be a major source of income for a long time. Can you talk about the relationship between China and Iran and how the U.S. can try to weaken their trading as far as oil is concerned, so that we don't have a situation where Iran is becoming more and more powerful and more dangerous?
Yeah. Iran doesn't think they're a proxy of anyone, but the Chinese think the Iranians are their proxy. And the Chinese are right. You mentioned oil. Last year, China took over 90% of Iran's exports of crude oil. The volume of China's purchases of Iran's crude last year was 60% above that in 2017. I mentioned 2017 because that was the last year before the Trump administration reimposed sanctions on the purchase of Iranian oil. And the way that we can deal with the relationship between Iran and China is we can start enforcing our own sanctions. Biden has completely failed to do that. He has not been enforcing those sanctions at all. And he's been actually shoveling money into Iran, which is just incomprehensible. So we need a top to bottom review of our Iran policies. Just one other thing, which to put a point on this. On September 11th of last year, Biden entered into that agreement with Iran, and where he unfroze a lot of money, which, by the way, Iran used to attack Israel just a little bit afterwards. But also, Biden granted clemency to 5 Iranian operatives. And inexplicably, incomprehensibly, he allowed 3 of those operatives to remain in the United States. I mention that because Iranian operatives at that time were trying to kill Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and other senior State Department officials from the Trump era. Since that time, we have learned that Iranian operatives are actually trying to kill President Trump as well. So we have a State Department, we have an NSC, National Security Council, that has been penetrated by Iranian operatives. We have a government that looks like it is trying to promote Iran's war on us. And clearly, we need a new president to clean that out.
You've spoken extensively about China's looming demographic collapse due to its aging population and its surprisingly low birth rate. What will be the impact of both of these developments?
Yeah, that's a great question, Roger. And the answer is, I don't know, and I don't think anybody else knows either. What's happened is that China now has 1.4 billion people. If you project out their total fertility rate, which is the average number of children per female who has reached childbearing age, replacement is 2.1 TFR. China officially has a 1.3 TFR, and probably in reality, it's far lower than that. You start projecting out these numbers, and it appears that by the turn of the century, China will lose about 2/3 of its population. No society has ever gone through that population loss in the absence of war or disease. Even in the Black Death in Europe in the Middle Ages, societies only lost 1/3 of their population. So we don't know how that's going to affect China, because we've never seen that before in any other society. But obviously, it's not going to be good for their economy. It's not going to be good for their society. We're starting to see it's going to be very difficult for China to reverse that, if it can at all. And clearly, China is going to become a much less powerful country. The only way out for China, I suppose, is that they start a war, which is, by the way, their only way out for their economic problems, which means that Xi Jinping must be seeing a closing window of opportunity. His main form of diplomacy is to intimidate everybody. You can intimidate everybody if you're one of the largest, most populous nations on earth. You can't intimidate others if your country is falling apart beneath you. And that's why we have to worry about Xi Jinping acting now rather than later.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank our guest, Gordon Chang. Again, his new book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, available right now at Amazon. Let me recommend that to you. Gordon Chang, thank you so much for joining us today in the Stone Zone.
Well, thank you, Roger, and thank you, Troy. I really appreciated the opportunity.
Great exchange. Many thanks. Well, folks, today is my wife's birthday, Nidia Bertrand de Espinoza Stone. I'm not going to say how old she is because I'm a gentleman, but she is the daughter of a Cuban diplomat. Her parents were born in Cuba and lived in Cuba. Her father was stationed at the Cuban consulate in the United States under Batista. She then moved back to Havana, where she grew up there for a couple of years before her father was reposted to Washington, D.C. And of course, she is the love of my life. Baby, happy birthday. All right, Troy, a lot of political news. Probably the biggest story out there was that train wreck between Brett Baer of Fox News and Kamala Harris. I'm not really sure what to make of it. I'm still trying to absorb it. It looked to me like Brett Baer lost control of his own interview. And all that really happened here was that Kamala Harris just began shouting her pre-approved talking points that her campaign had developed. Didn't matter what's happened, despite the fact that she has been in office for the last 3.5 years. No matter what happened, it's Donald Trump's fault. Really an extraordinary performance. You could see Brett Baer's frustration with the way this went. What did you think?
Well, Roger, I think when we look at Brett Baer, we know what we have there, and that's not an individual that is supporting the America First movement. And for all of the stuff we hear from the left about, Fox News is so right-leaning, with people like Brett Baer conducting their big interviews, my question is, where are the right-leaning people that they talk so much about? And that was another thing I saw with this interview in particular, Roger, because I've noticed something in this election cycle, and I wanted to ask you about it. And you can answer this after we roll the clip, because we do have a clip of that exchange between Brett Baer, the most testy exchange between Brett Baer and Kamala Harris. But I've noticed that a lot of the things that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing are trying to appeal to people that may be more center or more right. You see Tim Walz out there with his guns, Kamala Harris saying, I'm a gun owner, trying to make these appeals to maybe people who lean more to the right. And then if you observe the way that President Trump has been talking and the way that he's put out statements, whether it's, I won't sign a national abortion ban, his policies, the way he's selling himself is almost to the left. And I think, just my opinion, that this was a miscalculation by an inexperienced politician, because the purpose, in my opinion, of Kamala Harris going on to Fox News is to appeal to people who watch Fox News, because her people know that in order for her to win this election, she's going to have to reach more people than the hardcore Democrats. And the fact that she couldn't get through the interview without viciously attacking Brett Baer, who, by the way, no friend of President Trump, speaks to, I think, the fact that she's really inexperienced. She's not ready for this stage, and it's showing every time. Let's roll that clip and then get Roger's thoughts on I think this is a faux pas here. I think this is a big mistake. Let's roll that.
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
Now, this is almost laughable. The Department of Defense has just released, under the Harris-Biden administration, their new regulations giving them the authority to use lethal force against American citizens. Donald Trump has never said, ever, that he would lock people up for criticizing him. These Republican endorsements that she touted, yes, John Kelly, General John Kelly, who was ignominiously canned for incompetence and for his efforts to undermine President Trump's agenda, and who came up with a slew of lies and criticisms of Trump only after he was fired, has now endorsed Kamala Harris. General Mark Milley, he's the guy who called the Chinese and said, don't worry, we won't launch any kind of attack on you without my calling and telling you in advance. That's treason, by the way. Yeah, he's been critical of President Trump. Defense Secretary Esper, an incompetent. Yes, he was fired, and only after he was fired did he criticize President Trump. They keep touting these Republican endorsements. Dick Cheney, who started a war that cost the lives of tens of thousands of Americans and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis when he knew that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction, when he knew that Iraq had no involvement whatsoever in 9/11. These are the big Republican endorsements that she touts. And to claim that Trump would weaponize the Justice Department to jail his political enemies when she's part of an administration that's seeking to do that even as we speak. This is Alinskyism gone wild. In her tone, that strident tone, I don't think that helped her at all.
No, I agree with you, Roger. That was the biggest takeaway for me. It was the tone. And, you do these interviews. These politicians do these interviews because they're trying to appeal to people. That was not appealing. Although it was appealing, I will say, to the people who bash Fox News constantly. And, those are the diehard Democrats. And quite frankly, I mean, we saw this in 2020. They could put a dead person on the ballot and he will win. I mean, not literally, but almost pretty much. No matter who the candidate is on the Democrat side, the people who love that interview are going to vote for him. The people who are watching that, trying to see what Kamala Harris is really about, are going to take away something different. We're seeing, Roger, attacks across the board as we head into this election. And one of the most interesting folks, is Pete Buttigieg, because he doesn't really do his job. I mean, he goes to, if there's a disaster, he'll show up in his boots and take a couple pictures. But for the most part, he spends all of his time on cable news, CNN, NBC. He's always on the Sunday shows. I mean, I really feel like there isn't a Sunday that goes by where Pete Buttigieg is not on one show or another. We have a clip of him attacking Trump over that Kamala Harris interview, talking about Trump saying that he's weak, and they're criticizing now, saying he's not doing CNBC or something like that. He talks about that. Let's roll that clip and then get Roger's thoughts on the roundhouse criticism that's going on by these Democrats and what seems to be desperation. Let's roll that.
But given that you have such experience with going on Fox, I mean, did you give her any advice about this interview beforehand?
I wasn't involved in her interview prep. What I will say is that, one principle I try to remember that I thought she demonstrated is making sure not to allow them to kind of change the subject or the framing of the question at hand, right? The whole topic there was the fact that a candidate for president and a former U.S. president described the American people, the ones he disagreed with, as the enemy. And it's really important not to allow some sidestepping of that. So, she did that. She also made sure to continue to get her point across, even when she was being repeatedly interrupted. As somebody who has a lot of batting practice myself on that network, really proud of how she represented her views, her values, and this ticket in front of a conservative audience. Something I might add, by the way, that is a show of strength. That is the exact opposite of the weakness that Donald Trump has demonstrated by pulling out of going even on CNBC, which is hardly a liberal bastion, or 60 Minutes, where it's customary for both candidates to go on. He's not prepared to go in front of a skeptical, let alone unfriendly audience. She demonstrated the opposite. And remember, this is in keeping with her continued outreach to conservatives. Look at the difference between her making clear that she would include Republicans in her cabinet, campaigning with so many Republicans, principal Republicans, who are for her, versus him referring to Democrats as the enemy.
Yeah, and there was one.
I mean, you don't even know where to start. As I recall, their standard bearer called people who supported Donald Trump deplorables. Their administration calls Americans who support the right to life, Americans who are concerned about the curriculum being taught to their children in the public schools, Americans who may choose as Catholics to attend the Catholic Mass, as domestic terrorists. Who is it that is attacking the American people? Sure, let's go to 60 Minutes, where we know they will actually edit the interview to change the answers. I've never seen that in 45 years in the arena. Who was that man interviewing Pete Buttigieg, by the way? Anyway, this is black is white. These people see everything backwards from the way it actually is. It really, really boggles the mind. Troy,
we have another. Well, and you're exactly right, because this has been, they're salivating over this interview. They're acting like this is one of the greatest interviews of all time. And one of your favorites, we haven't brought him up in a while because he's kind of been missing. And it's kind of interesting, he gets fired by CNN and he crawls back to them. One of the creepiest, weirdest guys I've ever seen, Brian Stelter. Now, he went on the air, Roger, and said, I can't even say it with a straight face, that this was one of the best interviews that Kamala Harris has ever done. He claimed that it was, he might as well have said that God was in the interview. So let's roll that clip of Brian Stelter, just smooching Kamala Harris on the behind on CNN.
Exactly. I totally agree, Ashley. I think this strategy from Harris was a Google strategy. She wanted Fox viewers to start to Google some of the things she was saying, because some of the comments she was making in this interview are foreign to the Fox audience. For example, General Mark Milley saying Trump is a fascist to the core. That's barely been covered on Fox News. So she was able to get some of those talking points in. This was the most adversarial interview Kamala Harris has probably ever done. Instead of getting to debate Trump again, she got to debate Bret Baier. And a lot of viewers are going to come away saying, wow, she's willing to do that. That's a sign of toughness and strength.
Yeah, it's impressive indeed.
Folks, I urge you to go right now into Google Mr. Potato Head. and see if a picture of Brian Stelter does not come up on your computer. I mean, this guy has no credibility at all, but people at airports all across America may have been watching that interview. Really quite extraordinary. All right, Troy, let's get a little more time here. We have a quick interview that Robert Kennedy did with Cherie Peoples. This is the woman who we first began talking about on this show. She's a Black mother who was actually prosecuted by Kamala Harris because her daughter was missing from public school. Her daughter, in fact, had suffered a debilitating stroke because she had sickle cell anemia. The sickle cell anemia required blood transfusions every 3 weeks. She was spent most of that time that she was not in school hospitalized. All of this has been documented to the school system. We're well aware of the child's health problems. Kennedy did a terrific interview with both mother and daughter. It's a little long, but it's worth seeing. Let's roll that.
I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy.
I saw the film on you about two weeks ago.
I don't agree what Kamala Harris did to my mom, and I don't agree with what she's done to other parents as well.
The focus that I saw you take, Cherie, is talking about Kamala Harris criminalizing moms at some point. That's what happened to you. I saw the press conference at the time that Kamala Harris did, in which she said the state was losing over $1 billion a year in federal funds because of truancy rates.
Because of truancy, California public schools lose $1.4 billion a year in funding.
She said, I want that money.
I want money.
Put the parents of truant kids in jail, of kids who did not show up for school, to put them in prison and send out a message.
We threatened the parents of truants with prosecution.
And you were one of the first people to actually encounter that new policy. So what happened to you?
My daughter was born in 2002 with a traumatic, terminally ill condition called sickle cell.
I have sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is a hereditary disease and it is very, very painful.
They knew about her sickle cell anemia. They were aware of everything with her medical condition, her medical needs.
I spent a majority of my time here at the hospital.
In March of 2013, unaware to my knowledge, a knock at the door, and they came in and arrested me for truancy. I was arrested under Kamala Harris' strict truancy policies.
And actually the police, when they came to arrest you at your home, they said to you,
go talk to Kamala Harris.
Because you told them your daughter had been hospitalized for 60 days, and that's why she missed 60 days of school.
And because of my arrest, I lost my home, my job, my livelihood. It made me homeless. Despite Kamala Harris' current rhetoric about her commitment to Black women and families, my case exemplifies how her policies have criminalized instead of support.
How did you lose your home as an outcome of that?
Losing my job, unable to work due to the fact that I was a nurse's assistant. My license was at risk, and because, of course, they run your not your credit check, but your background check, and it showed that I had a current open case with the courts, and they released me from my duties. It took me 2.5 years to fight my case to prove that I wasn't a criminal with a chronically ill child with the oldest hereditary condition in the world. 1 in every 365 Black Americans have sickle cell. These children are very sick and they need support. We do not need to be criminalized, and I'm here to say, do not trust Kamala Harris.
And Shayla, how did you feel knowing that when you heard that your mom got arrested?
I saw all of the news vans in front of my school, and I was like, what's happening? What's going on? And I remember she came home, wouldn't hug me, which was concerning because we always give hugs and talk about our days when I get home. and she went to shower. And it was later that evening that she told me she was arrested. And I was very confused because I was like, you didn't do anything wrong. I don't know why.
And you had a stroke during the trial?
Yes. In the middle of her trial, I had my stroke.
I had a stroke about 4 or 5 days ago. And right now I'm doing pretty good. My hand is doing okay, I guess.
The sickle cell can cause you to have a stroke at an early age, but I was told that it was exacerbated due to stress. It was the stress of us not having a home and being in and out of the hospital while she was on trial. It caused me so much stress that it caused a blood clot and I had a stroke.
Shayla, when you were in the hospital, did you do the schoolwork from your hospital?
Yes, I did. I had a teacher here at the hospital that came every day, Monday through Friday, and we would do schoolwork for 2 hours. We did that every day, Monday through Friday. I had homework. I was with my class and my grade level, even being in the hospital.
Wow, I'm very, very impressed. I'm very, very proud of you. Do you have any evidence that Kamala Harris knows or knew of what was happening to you?
She knew. She was the whistleblower of the truancy policy. She told all her top district attorneys who was a part of the rape and murder investigation unit to go after all of the truants.
My homicide prosecutors, my gang prosecutors. And they went over there and I said, when you go over there, look really mean.
I don't understand why I was criminalized as a Black mother. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to my daughter. And that is the reason why I'm saying do not trust Kamala Harris, because the policies that she put in place as the state attorney general here in California disproportionately affected me and my child, not just then, but to this day, because I'm still affected.
What is your living situation today?
Well, our living situation today tends to be a little bit unstable due to the fact that she's in and out the hospital a lot. We've been in motels for a while, living with family members. So I'm always at risk of homelessness. And that's the reason why that we have a GoFundMe at this moment to help us during this time of crisis, because my income is tremendously affected.
Sheree, thank you so much. Shayla, God bless you and keep up your hard work. And thank you for your courage.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this opportunity for me and yours. I am so honored to be with you today.
Shayla, really good to meet you. God bless you.
It is nice to meet you too. Thank you for listening to our story and helping us give awareness to not only sickle cell, but to what Kamala has done to us and what she continues to do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Very powerful. I hope folks will go to the GoFundMe. We'll put that up for you. They are still fighting homelessness. They're still fighting being virtually indigent. 2 years of fighting for your life wiped out their family financing. And it's very difficult to work with a child who is once again hospitalized. Troy, we got a little bit of time here left. Where do you want to take this?
Well, we have a few more news items, but Roger, I just wanted to say that watching that clip, it's so great to see Robert F. Kennedy Jr., involved with the Trump campaign, going out there and engaging voters like that. I think that video speaks to the value of RFK Jr. and what he brings to the table. I think maybe one day when we look back at this election, we will look at the endorsement of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsing President Trump and we'll say that was the turning point. That video, tremendous work by RFK Jr. But there is another person in politics, Roger, that I think may be a bigger problem for Kamala Harris. And his name is President Joe Biden. Let's put up the picture of Joe Biden wearing the Trump hat. During the Fox News interview yesterday, Roger, Kamala Harris was asked about Joe Biden's presidency, and she very clearly stated that her presidency, if elected, would be nothing like the presidency of Joe Biden. Now, this directly contradicts the statements made by Joe Biden, who at a White House press briefing just a few days ago said that there's virtually no difference between his policies and Kamala Harris's policies. He stated that she was the last person in the room for the Afghanistan withdrawal. He stated that she was the border czar. He stated that she was leading on China and other nations. So I want to ask you, heading into this election, what are the probabilities in your mind that we're going to see Biden loyalists within the Democrat Party sabotage Kamala Harris? Because what he's saying and what she's saying are complete opposites here, Roger.
Yeah, it seems to be that Joe Biden is kind of schizophrenic. There's no question of his deep hatred for Donald Trump. He talked about attacking Trump as a criminal the other day. On the other hand, when is Jill Biden going to go out and campaign for the ticket? I think that's never is when that is. It's very clear in his lucid moments that he's still very bitter about being pushed out as the nominee. So I think you're going to see this continued schizophrenia where sometimes he attacks her, sometimes he supports her. He's a pretty shrewd politician. I consider that that embrace of her saying that she was involved in everything, she's responsible for everything, she was a full partner. That's a death hug, is what that is. Joe Biden remains a wild card for this particular contest. I don't think he would like to be succeeded by Kamala Harris. On the other hand, he's conflicted by his deep hatred for Donald Trump.
Well, and Roger, the hatred of Donald Trump is something that we see on the Democrat side on a daily basis, and it seems it's like a Trump derangement syndrome that's infecting huge parts of the country. And you have these people like Gwen Walls, and she really, as she continues to go out into public, it's getting weirder and weirder. We've kind of criticized her on the show for some of the strange things she says. We have another clip where she criticizes Trump over IVF. Now, let's keep in mind that when the Alabama Supreme Court had a ruling that was a little iffy on IVF, President Trump immediately called the Alabama legislator and governor and had them worked with them to pass legislation to protect IVF in the state of Alabama. He's also proposed that that the government will actually pay for people to get IVF treatment if he is elected to office in 2024. So he's actually promised free IVF treatment for people. And yet the Democrats continue to criticize him on the idea of IVF. And they say, oh, Trump would sign a national abortion ban. I want to get your thoughts on this statement by Gwen Walsh and the idea that they keep trotting these people out here. She may be worse than Tampon Tim himself. Let's roll that clip.
Just yesterday, he was here in Georgia for a town hall. And surprise, surprise, he tried to rewrite, that's just fine. He tried to rewrite his terrible record on reproductive freedom. In fact, and I can hardly believe this, in fact, he called himself the father of IVF. That's what he said. That's what he said. That's a direct quote. The father of IVF. I would say more like the father of Georgia's abortion ban. That's right. Now, I'm a longtime teacher, and in my classroom, we believe in facts. So here are a few. Donald Trump overturned Roe versus Wade. Yes. Say it with me. That's a fact. That's a fact. And because of him, more than 21 states have extreme abortion bans, including here in Georgia. And guess what? That's a fact. And now he's running on a platform that threatens IVF nationwide. And that is also a fact. Very good. Look here. There was a bill up for a vote in the United States Senate that would have protected IVF. And you know what? Republicans blocked it. Yes, they did. Trump's hand-picked apprentice, J.D. Vance, did not even bother to show up for that vote. So on every score, the father of IVF isn't just creepy, it's downright nuts.
Speaking of lies, I love those signs that say coach. Sorry, Tim Walsh was never a football coach. He was an assistant coach. just like he lied about his rank in the military, just like he lied about having seen combat while in the military, just like he lied about his DUI, just like he lied about being in Tiananmen Square on the anniversary of the cataclysmic events there. You can always tell when Tim Walsh is lying. You know how? His lips are moving. That woman is almost as cringe as Hillary Clinton, and let's face it, that's saying a lot. All right, a few housekeeping things here, folks. I want to remind you that to watch the show every day, you got a couple of options. We're at worldviewtube.com every day at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern. You can see Troy and I also later in the day at 8 p.m. Eastern on Rumble. To do that, you go to rumble.com/Roger Stone. You click there on the follow button and then set a notification for yourself to remind you about our daily show. Really appreciate your following us there on Rumble if you can't catch the show on Worldview Tube earlier in the day. So do that great favor for us. Also, I must mention that we continue to be sponsored by the great people at mypillow.com. Thank God for Mike Lindell, America's #1 advocate for free speech and election integrity. They're attacking him the same way they attack us. So please go to mypillow.com, and when you do, use promo code STONE, Now, I've got a few really favorite products there. I love the dog beds, also suitable for cats, come in multiple sizes depending on the size of your pet. The pet blankets to keep your pets warm and snugly in those dog beds. And of course, there are the famously absorbent bath and shower towels, the luxurious bed sheets, all great products. Please go to mypillow.com, and when you do, please use promo code STONE. We will see you tomorrow. We have been had a lot of political news this week. We've cranked out a great deal of content. We appreciate you, and we appreciate your watching us here every day on the Stone Zone. Again, 5 days a week. 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern at Worldview Tube. But if you missed that and you want to catch the show, 8 o'clock at Rumble. So on behalf of my co-host, Troy Smith, and myself, until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?